that issue, Commissioner, you know, we are of course looking at the effect of body-worn video on not only complaints but also on use of force, particularly the kind of complaints that are usually resolved by body-worn video or that may be effective. And so we will have a more complete report to the Commission on that as body-worn rolls out to a greater degree in the department. But that is something, of course, that we're very, very interested in.
How many officers have body-worn now?
About 2,200. Danny just left. He could tell you exactly, but I think it's about 2,200.
30% there.
Right. Or well, 7,000 being the goal. Yeah, we're getting there.
Thank you, Chief. We all know that body-worn cameras are an important part of the Commission's efforts to increase transparency and accountability and to reduce overall incidents of use of force and racial bias. According to a recent report, which I know we all saw, the use of body cameras in San Diego has reduced misconduct allegations, high-level use of force by officers, and helped exonerate more officers by proving allegations false. So I'd like to request a written report along the lines that you just shared. The first, if you could do it in 30 days, that tells us which divisions currently have body cameras, including how many each has and when they were deployed, and a detailed schedule for the expected rollout and deployment to be completed for the remaining geographic divisions, traffic divisions, and metropolitan division, and if you could explain how and why that particular schedule was selected. And then a second written report in 60 days that tells us for the divisions that have had body cameras for at least 1 year, the following information comparing year prior to deployment of the cameras and year post-deployment, looking at one, the number of all personnel complaints, including the total number of allegations broken down by frequency per officer and adjudication status, and number two, the number of categorical use of force incidents and the number of non-categorical use of force incidents.
And of course, the department would be glad to do that. You know, many of these complaints, because of the time cycle, are not yet adjudicated, but I think the raw numbers may be informative. So that's not a problem. As far as the rollout schedule, we'll be glad to put that in, but the rollout schedule was approved by this commission when we initiated the program. So we'll be glad to put that in.
Thank you, appreciate that.
I just thank you first for the report, and I know that we have the mediation piece in the next item, so I'm very interested in having a broader discussion about that. You sort of opened, or in some of your remarks, you indicated that with respect to bias policing, that it's difficult to adjudicate the complaints, it's hard to know what's in people's minds, etc. And also observed that you would be happy to deal with this sort of more in a more comprehensive way in connection with a committee oversight. So I want to A, say that I'm looking forward to doing that, and B, I'm just becoming increasingly frustrated would be the wrong word. I guess I'm not clear that the criteria or that bias policing as a category, given the sort of persistent report or nature of the reports, that is a category that has meaning, and am struck by your comment that it's difficult to know people's minds because that makes it very difficult to adjudicate in a way that's clear when things like discourtesy, racial remarks, and there's certain actions or behaviors which clearly are easier to identify. So I will be interested in both better understanding how we track bias policing, because this may simply not be the way to do it. There may be some other analysis that gets to that figure, or that gets to that sort of question, and how we better identify, report, investigate, or characterize the kind of policing that includes objectionable behaviors, since that seems to be far easier to identify, investigate, and adjudicate. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there as something to think about and look forward to exploring that with you in a different form.
I'd be very happy to do that. Thank you.
Is there an action step?
Yes, there is. There's need a motion to approve the department's report. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We don't have any,
We have none, sir.
thank you.
We're now on item number 2C, Department's Report dated February 10, 2017, relative to the evaluation of the Bias Policing Complaint Mediation Pilot Program for the Board of Police Commissioners.
Well, good morning again. The LAPD, we pursued this mediation program since 2009. My predecessor, since I've only been in internal affairs, I shouldn't say only, since it's been 4 years now almost, but my predecessor carried the bulk of the work, and they reached out to community stakeholders. The Board of Police Commissioners, Commissioner Mack was very involved, the Los Angeles Police Protective League, and there was widespread support for the program. And of course, the goal of the program is to improve community trust, to help build a closer relationship with the public. And to accomplish that by influencing how officers communicate with and treat the public, and educating the community also as to how and why officers do what they do. So our program is slightly different than traditional mediation. Unlike traditional mediation, the parties are not required to reach a formal agreement. In a typical mediation program, like landlord-tenant type dispute or a neighbor dispute, there's a requirement to agree. With ours, there isn't. What we require is that parties hear, clarify, and understand the issues and each other's point of view. And then they can agree, or they can agree to disagree, or they can apologize. And I say they, I mean, and we've had situations where really both parties have apologized. Officers have apologized to community members have apologized to officers, and they've been special moments. So as you know, with the board's approval, we launched this program in January 2014. It's a partnership with the city attorney's office, their dispute resolution program. We could never do this on our own, so we owe our partners in this a great debt of gratitude. And since it's been going, in August 2015, we had a research team from USC that conducted an implementation study, and their findings were that the program was implemented successfully, that mediators were well prepared, and that officers and complainants were both highly satisfied and confident in the process. So just a quick summary of the 3 years worth of mediations. 708 complaints were actually referred to the program, meaning that we do our best to identify bias policing, and then of course discourtesy became part of it in I think last year. But we do our best to identify those complaints at intake. They get referred to the program coordinator, who then screens them. 345, or approximately 49% of the 708 complaints, were not eligible for mediation. 363, approximately 51%, were eligible. And of those, 73 mediations were actually conducted, and there were 18 that were closed as mediated because of complainant no-shows, meaning that if the complainant, without good cause, was scheduled for 2 mediations and didn't show for either one, we could close the complaint as mediated. So of the 363 eligible, 263 were reassigned for investigation, and then we of course started to look at the data. Why were they reassigned? What were the issues behind them? And so of the 263, 59, or about 22%, the complainant we couldn't locate or contact. They disappeared or would have nothing to do with us. 118, the complainant declined. 67, or about 25 to 26%, officers declined. 12 were determined to be inappropriate for mediation as we got further into it, and 7 were of the the discourtesy type complaints where the alternate complaint resolution program ultimately ended up being used. So we saw those numbers for the first 2 years, and then we needed to even take a closer look at why officers and complainants declined. So we started to do that and to capture that data in 2016, just last year. So of the 130 that were actually reassigned for investigation in 2016, complainants could not be located approximately 15% of the time, and 50% of the time, complainants and their reasons for declining, either they wanted a full investigation, the process was too much trouble, or in 22 of the cases, they just refused to give us a reason. Of the officers that declined, they wanted a full investigation, they wanted to avoid the other party, or in 10 of the 32, when officers declined, they didn't give us a reason either. So because of the high number of complainants that have declined over the years, the original goal of the program was to do this, but we finally got to do it during the last year in order to make it easier for complainants to participate. We identified, or the city attorney for us, identified mediators that were available during evening hours and weekends, and we tried to make it as convenient as possible for the complainants, including, of course, holding sessions in their communities where they lived, and using, for example, libraries. Originally, most of the mediations were held downtown Monday to Friday during regular business hours, and that was just not a good way of doing business. So we did learn from that.
Really?
And making it easier for complainants. The other half was selling it better to our employees. And what we tried to do over the last year is to use what I might call a mediation veteran, but an officer that's been through mediation. We use officers that have been through the process at department training sessions so they can share their experiences with other officers and help sell the program. So satisfaction, and we provided a lot of data for you on the satisfaction, but the participants, and that's complainants and the officers, have been overwhelmingly satisfied with the process. They believed it to be fair. They reported an increase in understanding of the other party, and they were more than likely to recommend the program to others. We did a cost analysis, just so you can see the difference, and clearly the traditional investigation and adjudication process, it costs considerably more than mediation, and actually the cost of investigation and adjudication will only grow as we get more audio and audio and video and in-car video, because of the time it takes to review that. So there are clear savings with mediation over the traditional process, and I'll get back to that in just a second. So, bless you. So, as I stated at the beginning, our goal was to strengthen the relationships and with the community, to build greater trust, and I believe we are progressing toward that goal. Participants have expressed a lot of merit, of the face-to-face interaction. Complainants value having the opportunity to express their concerns directly to officers, and officers have valued explaining their actions to complainants. And on occasion, acknowledging that they could have acted differently, and some, of course, like I said, have even apologized. So, cost analysis, in my opinion, if the cost analysis was reversed and it was cheaper to investigate, less expensive to investigate and adjudicate, and mediation was more, I would still recommend mediation as the way to move forward. So moving forward, what do we envision, or what are we doing? We're working on, and we're developing a screening instrument with the City Attorney's Office to better match mediators with participants, so we can put the right kind of mediator with participants who are maybe receptive, or they, based on personal communication style or their experience with the complaint process, to just match them up and marry them up a little better, so we have hopefully even more success. We're looking at better ways, or developing ways, to better identify and implement the lessons learned to prevent future we're committed to doing that, so they can use these lessons learned when they develop or look at tweaking roll call training and in-service training and of course recruit training. And we are looking at publishing a quarterly or a semi-annual, I haven't really decided, newsletter throughout the department, a bias policing mediation newsletter to share mediation success stories with the entire department. So looking forward, we also want to make one little tweak to the program. We have one recommendation to actually tweak the program moving forward. Of course, our main recommendation is that the program be continued, but currently, I think I mentioned earlier that there's a provision in the program that if a complainant without good cause does not appear at key mediation sessions, we should close the complaint as mediated. And our recommendation is to amend that ever so slightly and close a case as mediated if the complainant, instead without good cause, fails to attend one session, and then, because after one session we make numerous outreach attempts to the complainant, telephone, email, mail, where we actually send them a letter, and we make in-person attempts to contact them as well to schedule another session. So our recommendation is that if they fail to attend to one and then still without good cause, and then we are unable to contact them after only making and documenting multiple attempts to set up a second session, that at that point we close it as mediated. But in order to track them so we're clear on what we're doing and so we can report back accurately that we don't use the same mediated disposition, but we'll create a different disposition. So it'll show as mediated complainant no-show or something else that we'll come up with to make a clear differentiation between the two.
My only concern with that, everything you said is reasonable, but I would have to have some clearer criteria established regarding how we're reaching out to them, the multiple attempts, what we have to do before we can determine that they have
We can do that.
applied to participate.
We can have a definite numerical criteria, how many phone calls, how many attempts, and we can do that and come back to the board with that
Okay.
when we publish an order.
Yeah, I'm curious about, you indicated that you started doing mediations, that I guess the first 2 years of the pilot, you were doing them downtown during business hours. And I guess I'm just curious as to, because, let me say first, that from my perspective, among the more promising approaches to dealing with some of these issues is a more direct contact and mediated model. I've had the opportunity to talk to folks who've been involved in developing mediation models for this kind of work. Also had some conversation with representatives of the league about their view of this model of dispute resolution or complaint resolution. So I think it's something that we should explore and really commit to in a pretty aggressive way. But I'm curious as to the inputs into the development of our program, because I am baffled that we would have for 2 years of a 3-year pilot been downtown during business hours, and as an effective, I would imagine that most community members would tell you that doesn't work. So how is it that we were?
I think part of the difficulty had to do with the mediators. They're volunteer mediators that do this for the city attorney's office for their program. And it's twofold. I'll take responsibility for not pushing hard enough to make that happen. And the difficulty, of course, was getting the mediators. But we could have and should have done better and made that change a lot quicker than we did.
Well, if somebody in San Pedro, the officers in San Pedro and the citizens in San Pedro, the idea of making them all come downtown for the convenience of the mediator.
I would feel the same way if they lived in Rampart. There's no reason to should have had it, I should have pushed for it sooner.
I would add, however, that the city attorney office controls much of this, and I know Stu pushed very hard from the onset, but we're not the only partner here. It's not unilateral. You have to.
So, yeah, thank you. I know that there are multiple parties, and to make this work, we'll need the cooperation of all of them. So, I would be less interested in making, well, I certainly support the question for the inquiry made by Commissioner Johnson, and not as interested in tweaking the program as I am in understanding and perhaps having some additional interaction with the partners and understanding how we might make the program generally more attractive and better known and increase participation. I also know that there are some concerns about program design that I'd like to discuss. Again, I think it would probably be more appropriate for committee meetings, so I'll hold off on that.
Okay. I'd be happy to meet and go over all of it with you.
Thank you for the report. I'm glad to see that it's increasing trust and understanding on both sides. And I wanted to see if you could share a little bit about, you describe in the report some of the lessons learned about how to prevent future complaints and how you could see those being incorporated into roll call briefings and in-service trainings.
I think one of the biggest lessons as far as officers is, I mean, it sounds maybe a little elementary, but they need to, when they engage in law enforcement activity, be it any kind of, consensual encounter, detention, whatever it may be, stopping somebody to write them a ticket, they need to make sure they leave the community member whole when they're done with the contact. And it sounds very basic, but we can never reinforce that enough. And that's one of the main lessons from this. I mean, we've had success stories where, officers coming into mediation have been shocked and surprised that people felt the way they did after they contacted them. I think we put a story in this report about an elderly couple that went to mediation together because they were allowed to bring a support person, and the officer was shocked that the woman felt the way she did because I think his exact comment was he would never treat his mother that way, and I mean, he walked out of there, learning something new to him. And I mean, those are the kinds of success stories we have. Those are the lessons learned. I mean, in law enforcement circles, they call it dusting someone off. But it really requires making sure that you leave them whole, you leave them feeling good about themselves, with their dignity intact. And at times, it's not a weakness even to apologize, even if the officer did nothing wrong, but to apologize for an inconvenience. Because oftentimes we do inconvenience people when we engage in law enforcement activity. We stop people and we inconvenience them. So there are a lot of lessons learned of that sort. Now, I think that's why one of the things we talked about is just publishing a quarterly newsletter. I think would get some of those stories out to share, with the entire department internally.
I think that's a good idea. And you hope that these experiences are being shared when the individual officers are going back to their individual divisions, but to have it shared on a more global basis would definitely be a positive. As you noted, the cost savings is a nice to have, but if it was more expensive, I would be in support of this program as well. When you look at the satisfaction of the parties on both sides, especially when you compare it to the fact that if you go through the normal complaint process, particularly on a bias policing complaint, it's likely to not be resolved in a way that the complainant would hope. That not just for the individuals involved, but also you hope for the community members when they go and talk to their families and friends, which certainly they did when the incident happened, and likewise with the officers who the complaint process is obviously a very difficult situation for them, and no one likes to have a complaint lodged against them, and to go through this process with a positive outcome for them and a different understanding. This is really a win-win program.
Thank you.
One comment. It has a very high satisfaction rate amongst those who use it.
Yes.
Both officers and the complainants.
Yes.
Which is good. It also has a very high rate of, for one reason or another, people choose not to do it.
Yes.
And I think that that's also worth looking at to see if you can get more people to do it. Because it's so successful when they do it. Whatever strategies there are to really take apart the reasons for people not doing it, one side or the other, it looks like it's 2/3, I don't know, which way is it? 2/3 the complainant and 1/3 the officers
Yes.
that chose not to.
Mm-hmm.
But how come you want to do it? And what can we do better so you can? Because the results are both sides say it works.
And that's why we tried to start gathering that data in 2016 and with another questionnaire to find out, why don't they want to participate?
Right. And
So we have a
that's
little
half of
more
it. So
information.
now that we have that information, how do we?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Do you have any comments on this?
We have one comment card. We have Mr. Ted Hayes.
Whose idea was this? This is ridiculous. When an officer encounters a civilian, it's usually because he has real suspicion crime has been conducted. The civilian's done something wrong. Mediation can't resolve that. If the officer is engaged in misconduct or abuse, mediation can't resolve that either. Now, I have no idea what you're intending to do, but I know something about mediation because for 2.5 years I've been mediating with the Cultural Affairs Division of the city. Huge amount of money, great big budget, does a lot in the city. It's about this title they give for Black History Month. They call it African American Heritage Month. Well, it's not heritage, it's history. They do not mean the same thing. We mediated on it for more than 2.5 hours. They still come out with this annual African American culture. Heritage, rather. So I think this is a lousy idea, it's a waste of time. Either a civilian has been engaged in a crime that deserves to be apprehended and taken to trial, or not. Either the officer has been abusive and used misconduct, or not. It doesn't go any farther than that. I have no idea what you plan on achieving. I guess it's a social relations program. I really don't know. But it doesn't make any sense. It's a waste of time. Nobody's going to kiss and make up. It's not going to happen that way. Maybe that's what you hope, maybe that's what you intend. I don't know what kind of training you expect to come out of this for the officer, but certainly you wouldn't change the attitude of a civilian who's been abused by a police officer. So I would suggest you get rid of the program. As Commissioner Silver pointed out, it's not well attended, it's not well participated in.
I move the recommendation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
Now on item number 3, report of the Chief of Police, Chief Beck.
Good morning, Commissioners. This past week, I went to Washington, D.C. for the Major City Chiefs Conference in combination with the Major County Sheriff's Conference. It's the top 60 or so cities in the United States, along with the top 60 or so counties in the United States, law enforcement leaders. It's an annual event. The reason I went this year, I don't normally go because I don't go to the city that long, but the reason I went this year was to hear some of the speakers. One speaker was the President of the United States. We also had General Kelly, his new Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, and then I also met with the FBI Director and enforcement in his comments in general. Didn't have a lot of specificity about what programs that support would take place in, and not a lot of specifics on what he thought the role of local authorities in immigration enforcement would be. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for, because of that, to inform his opinion as we go forward. So that was a takeaway from that. Same thing with General Kelly. I think that General Kelly has a strong desire to move forward the president's agenda, but I also think that he needs a lot more information, and as he noted in his comments, before that can take place. So I know that General Kelly has been meeting with law enforcement throughout the nation to try to inform himself on 287G and on ICE detainers and on all the other issues that he is going to have in his purview. He's also the individual that defines what a sanctuary city is. So, we want, and he has no set parameters in that definition yet, or at least that's what he said. So, we are, as major city chiefs and county sheriffs, going to try to put some input forward in that definition. So, a lot of discussion and not a lot of detail yet. So I think that we have an opportunity as organizations and also as a city to help inform the discussion, and I look forward to doing that.
Chief, were you able to, I guess you've been very public and the commission behind you and this entire community of Los Angeles behind you in your views of the detention and deportation policy, tweets of the President of the United States. And, did he mention anything to you about that?
Well, I know that when you live in Los Angeles, it affects your point of view on this issue. And I say that to say that every other major city chief has almost the identical opinion that I do. Right. There's not a lot of variation among the chiefs of police. We all believe that immigration is the purview of the federal government, and that local law enforcement shouldn't be engaged in it for the reasons that I've stated, because it deters people from coming forward, it breaks down cooperation, it causes people to run out the back door when they want to be running towards the front door. It is a horrible scenario for law enforcement. And so, it isn't so much that he would want to specifically speak to me, and he didn't, but that is the entirety of major city chiefs. So, he addressed the specific concerns to some extent, but what I took away from it is that they're not completely formed in what direction or what method to get to their goals. So I think that by offering positive suggestions, we may be able to influence that. So I will continue to try that. I met with also with Director Comey from the FBI. We met one-on-one for a while, and he and I had this exact same discussion. And I think that rhetoric aside, there is an opportunity to inform the actions of the federal government to this regard, and I think that's important. And I believe that is the primary way by which we will succeed.
Thanks for your leadership role.
Chief, you indicated that, I think you opened by saying that you found the president to be very supportive of law enforcement, and I am curious as to how that manifested itself, because immigration aside, I think some of the rhetoric that has been espoused by the president and his administration around stop and frisk, further militarization of cities, the federal government moving in to address local crime in Chicago, and the general tenor of the discussion has generated a lot of concern in places around the country. So, and frankly, the atmosphere that is created by that rhetoric, in my mind, undermines the basic bond between law enforcement and community. So I'm curious as to how that support was manifested, or what precisely you mean by that when you say very supportive of law enforcement.
I think I was pretty clear in that he stated support, but he didn't have a lot of details on how that support would be demonstrated. And when I say he supports law enforcement, that is what he said, that he supports law enforcement. And there's
So you're just referring to just his statement of support, not anything beyond that?
that's what I mean when I say that he stated support.